March. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Two potential developers for the downtown. And I'm going to turn it over to our new city manager, John Stark. He's been through this process before. I'd like to welcome our EDA, our Planning Commission. So thank you, everyone, for coming. So John Stark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did prepare a agenda memo for this. I know you read it. I'm just going to kind of go through it, though, for anybody that's watching, and so they kind of get some of the background. When the Economic Development Authority became aware of the property owner's desire to sell the land and buildings at 2503 to 2517 7th Avenue East, and these are also known as the Lilly building or Lilly properties. So when the EDA became aware of their desire to sell that property, they made a decision to try to secure a formal interest in that property. They did so in order to increase the likelihood that the ultimate development would align with our collective public goals. In fall of last year, the EDA enlisted Port Consulting to help guide the process. In December, the EDA asked Port Consulting to draft a letter of intent for presentation to the property owner. And that LOI, letter of intent, was further refined in January. The seller has agreed to the terms of the letter of intent, and the next step, which is currently in process, is to convert that LOI into a purchase agreement. Over time, two developers have expressed an interest in developing a project on the property. Both of the developers have refrained from dealing directly with the seller out of respect for the public process. The EDA has seen both proposals but has not taken any action to formally accept one or the other. At some point in time, the EDA will choose a developer to partner with in some way to take over the purchase process. I said that the EDA was pursuing some sort of interest in the property, which ultimately became a purchase agreement. The goal is that ideally the EDA would actually not be the ones purchasing the property. They would either transfer the purchase agreement to a developer, assign it to a developer that a developer would take on, or the EDA would enter into some kind of a partnership with the developer where the developer would buy out the EDA's interest. Ultimately, both the City Council and Planning Commission will have a significant role in approving any development that occurs. And so I felt it was important for both bodies to be able to preview the proposals. As Mayor Furlong said, this is kind of a first for North St. Paul. I've done this in previous similar positions. One difference is that the Planning Commission's a little larger here, and the EDA has more non-city council people on it. And so it was... Ideally, I would have liked all of the planning commissioners and all of the EDA members to be here, but that would have been probably unwieldy. So we're going to give this a try, see how it goes. The purpose of the workshop is to give policymakers an initial look at both proposals in order to ask some clarifying questions and to give some constructive feedback to the developers. It's also an opportunity for the developers to decide on how they would like to proceed based on reactions and general feedback. I would caution you that policymakers really should not be in a position to, quote unquote, choose a preferred proposal at this time, but rather discuss the relative merits of each of them. Depending on how the developers choose to proceed, the EDA will embark on a process to formalize a continuing relationship, likely with only one of them. So with that, the two development teams are here. I've got some, you've got electronic copies of the proposals. If anybody needs paper copies, I made a few extra of those, so just raise hands. And if members of the audience want to see paper copies, they're here available to people as well at my desk. We've asked developer John Pichia to present first, and so if he wants to come forward.
Welcome, John.
All right, thank you. How should I face? What do we think? You know what? I do best when I pace anyway. Do I have to be by a mic for people on Zoom, though?
I think you do.
For the record.
You got it. You bet.
You want to grab the mic and take it with you?
I think we'll be all right. I don't want to block your view here. All right, you guys. You hear me okay in this regard? Well, it sounds like I'm kind of the local option of the two developers. I don't know who the other developers are in the room. I'm sure I'll hear them next. Maybe it's you gentlemen. I don't know. But, there's also lots of local people in town probably passed out on the floor at Newman's right now, so that doesn't always say a lot. But I'll tell you what, though. I was born in North St. Paul, and I live currently in Grant, just a suburb north of North St. Paul, and I purchased a commercial building last year, the ugliest one, downtown North St. Paul. So I own the ugliest building. Can anyone guess what that might be?
The ugliest one.
Yes, you're right. It has a big sign that says Candy's Cafe on it. It's straight down the block. It's on Helen and 7th on the corner. I'm going to fix it up, and it's going to be a gorgeous little place. And I have my office. I run two businesses jointly. I own a construction business, and I own a real estate brokerage. I'm setting up shop in that building with my offices. So we've got my offices, my staff. Everybody's going to be moving in there in the next couple of months here. This whole idea for me, it didn't start with me seeking out a big old 1950s, kind of circa 1970s hodgepodge building. For me, it started with, I bought this building on the corner that made sense for me, and I saw right next door to it, directly to the east of it, a building sitting empty that's been sitting empty for as long as I've had my little building, which has only been a year, but I know up and down I go up and down the streets, I see the car shows, and that the Lilly building's been sitting empty. I didn't drive by and get motivated day after day after day, but I'll tell you, I woke up one morning and said, I got up real early. Too early this morning, and I said, why isn't anybody buying the Lilly building? I go, there's got to be just, what the heck, what's going on? I don't know if it's going to make sense for me or for anybody, but why isn't anybody doing it? So I'm a real estate broker, so I'm looking at I got all my records to everything. I'm looking at all the public records, all the tax information, square footage. I'm using aerial maps. I'm measuring with my ruler app that I have where I can use GIS. And I'm going, hold on a sec. So if I pop the top of this building, and I can fit 12 residential spaces, and on the main level, if I've got somewhat of a structurally sound building, at this time I didn't know what the condition was, I hadn't seen it yet, but I go, if it's decent, I might be able to make something happen here, and something within the scope of what I'm comfortable with. Remodeling, popping the top of a big building, yeah, sure, it's a large building. I'm very comfortable with that. The subcontractors that work for me handle this stuff all day long. So I'm looking at it going, all right, I got to get out there. So my wife and I run by her, I go, Karen, is this a terrible idea or what? She goes, well, I think it's a good idea. So her and I come out, we look at the property together, and I'm there with a structural engineer, and I'm walking it, and I go, what do you think? I mean, it's leaking like a sieve. There's like literally pails collecting rainwater as we're walking through the building. It was raining that day. And I go, what do you think? And he looks up and he goes, well, you know, the concrete up here, and he's pointing at his 15-foot, 6-inch ceilings, cast concrete, and he goes, I know that product. Moline, Minnesota concrete company based out of Lino Lakes, casts concrete in these particular 18-inch lengths. And he goes, I know that product. He goes, that stuff is bulletproof. So he goes, I think you're going to be okay. We didn't do any like real formal analyzing yet, but he goes, I think you're going to be okay. Because I'm just saying, I don't want to raise the building. I just want to pop the top. I want to do something I know I can manage, right? And I know my comfort level. So he tells me that. I get kind of pumped up a little bit more yet. And so then at that point, I said, well, we better start figuring out financing. I better start running the numbers on this thing. And it started to make sense. And it really started to make sense. So just so you know, a little bit about me, I went to school to be an airplane mechanic 25 years ago. Never worked on an airplane. Instead, at the same time, I got my real estate license and became a landlord at 19. Learned a lot. It was very good for me to experience that. I started my own real estate brokerage at 29, and now I'm 40, so I'm just 1 year behind, buying and doing my first large-scale development project. So I'm tracking a year behind if you look at my decades. When I became a landlord, I did it well, and I researched and I learned how to get a good tenant. That's the trick to being a good landlord. When I started my real estate brokerage, I realized there's only two things you have to do in this business. You have to be cool to people, and you have to make deals. And if you're cool to people and you make deals, you'll do well. And I did well, and I've done well. I have that business that's working. With my construction business, it's the same thing. But I realized with greater responsibility comes greater risk. And there are greater liabilities with the construction company. So I run that. Where I can just be cool to people making a deal in real estate. In construction, I have to analyze everything. I look at everything. I got my staff who's helping me with it all, and we make sure it's going to make sense from the beginning. Last thing I ever want to do is go have a project go wrong, over budget, or any. I don't want to deal with any of that as much as I can help that. So we try to plan on the front end. So in owning the building next door, I have a limited parking space. And this was actually part of my motivation for acquiring this larger building.
If I interrupt for just 1 second, just so people are tracking.
Yeah.
Mr. Peach's proposal is the one with the brick facade, the two-story.
Great. Yeah, thanks, John. I should have started with that. So, that's the idea that I dreamt up at about 4 a.m. that morning. Okay, so I own the building on the corner, and I have a very limited parking situation. I have a awkward triangular-shaped lot and I have tenants in the building, and if you've driven by, it's just cattywampus. There's any given time, there's 5 cars there, which is fair enough. The building can accommodate that, but they're on top of each other the whole time. So this whole thing for me started with, how can I get more parking? Because I really kind of need it. So anyway, as I'm looking at the plan, I said, well, the first thing I'd do is I'd make the Lilly building a little bit smaller because I want to be able to manage it. I want to be able to be very comfortable from the beginning of the construction process all the way to the end. So I'm going to make it a little smaller. So more or less, the west 30 feet or so, my plan is to demolish the west 30 feet of that building. This building was built in 5 phases, according to my structural engineer, somewhere between the 50s and the 70s. And there is a load wall. It looks like a former exterior wall right there. So I can lop off that part of the building and create 26 parking spaces in that area. Now, I have parking. I just solved my own problem because I've got a parking need on my building. And not to mention, I just can't help but think Friday night's car show, I've got this lot, private owned, it's my lot. I'm 100% open to just putting big signs up. Come park your cars here, set up a tent there. I'm fine with that. And I think that the community needs a little bit more parking space, especially with the Sentinel across the street, which has been a great thing for the community, I think. Time will tell. I think it will be very good. But it's limited some parking downtown. I think that this lot could be very helpful too. So that's where the ideas came from. That's how really got my juices flowing with it. And, right now to get a little bit more, into the numbers. So I've been working on my budget for the construction costs. I have my construction costs for what I want to do, popping the top, creating the parking lot, at $1.85 million. I have 3 to 5 months planning budgeted, and I have 1 year of construction budgeted. So that's my construction costs. That's my time frame. Acquisition cost, that's probably a conversation between the city and me, but I've got that accounted for as well. Okay. As far as coming up with my monthly expenses on this building, I was able to get very good estimates from people I know who own larger commercial properties. I've got a very accurate insurance estimate. I was also able to find a tax rate that I feel is very accurate for what I can expect this building to be assessed at after the projects are done. And I used about 9 different newer buildings of similar size around North St. Paul, most downtown, and I was able to figure out what they're paying on a percentage rate. So I have that factored into my expenses as well. So my total annual expenses on this, do we need to talk cash flow? Is that important?
I don't think you need to talk cash flow. I'm sorry. I don't know if you need to talk like pro forma stuff.
Okay.
But if you can maybe talk end market value.
Sure.
Would be a good.
Yeah, okay, you bet. Yep. Okay, so in leading into that, the ideal tenant, so I want to talk about that too, because that's important, and that's one reason why I didn't just go right to Lily and put the offer on the table with the Lily family. I know that North St. Paul and the EDA you want to see downtown get a little bit of life breathed back into it. And we all know that. Everybody knows downtown North St. Paul is a lovely place, but it's got a lot of there's some tiredness to it too. And so I know that that's been a goal, and I am completely, that's what I want to do is work with the city on that. So as I seek tenants, I'm looking for tenants that will bring commerce in, that'll bring people in short term, like a restaurant. That's a great example of who I'm looking for. I already have a gal who owns a coffee shop in St. Paul, very successful, who has expressed interest in what I'm doing here. So that's great. She might want to open a second location. That's a great spot to get community together. Also, the idea of retail, and even in the back area of the building, which I have just slotted for warehouse right now, potential volleyball courts. I have daughters that they play volleyball in Matamidi, and they play in Minnetonka. That's where everybody plays, because there isn't availability out here for courts. So that's another thought. But okay, so that's my goal with tenants. On the upper level, I want to have 12 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom units. I've got space up there for a shared laundry. So there'd be a separate laundry room, coin-op laundry. And there's also room in my plan right through the middle of the building where I'd put an elevator shaft as well. So those are the physical plans of the building. The building will be worth substantially more than what I'd be buying it for and putting the work into it. But I'm not going to talk to that yet. But it's going to be an equitable improvement for me and for the city and for the downtown area. I was asked by a gentleman at the Port Authority, he said, in a conversation about all of this, he said, why don't you put a 3rd story on it? Well, and then I said, well, let's see how the Sentinel does. I go, let's let them fill up. They'll fill up. They'll bring a lot of people in with their 3 stories. I want to keep my building 2 stories manageable, and I don't really want it to be, I I don't want to say, not in monstrosity by any means, but I don't want it to overshadow anything else downtown. We have a lot of very cute one-story buildings, and I feel like my nice two-story building will complement that. I think that's about it for my thoughts on it, my spiel. If you have any questions about the prints or any questions for me, definitely let me know. Yeah.
I think we will open it up to questions, John. I'll turn it over to city manager if you want to.
Sure. So I do have some questions jotted down, but I wanted to give other folks a chance to ask questions, and if the ones I have jotted down aren't asked, I'll come back in with mine.
Why don't we go ahead and go with city council first, if anybody here has any questions in regards to his plan, his vision. Thank you, John. I mean, that was a great presentation. We're excited that we have people looking at our downtown, and excited to have, people like you guys in the chambers tonight. So, Councilmember Cole, you got any?
At this point, I have no questions. I want to reiterate what the mayor said. Thank you. We're excited. We're excited to work with.
Cool.
Work with whomever comes in here. That there's interest in the city. This is fantastic.
Awesome.
Councilmember Wong?
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. Thank you for being here. I do have a question. It sounds like you have a few projects you've done. Have you worked in doing similar projects in other municipalities?
Well, good question. I own a building downtown Lake Elmo, and it was the ugliest building I could buy. That's kind of a trend. Yeah. Oh, whoops. So I have a building downtown Lake Elmo. It's smaller than this. It's just a cute little, it's a smaller commercial building. But we fully renovated that, and I've got just a beautiful tenant in there. She's a hair salon, and she's been very happy with how it has turned out over the past few years. And if you're ever driving in downtown Lake Elmo, it's kitty corner you got Lake Elmo Inn, it's kitty corner across the tracks. It's a dark green building with a really cool cedar accent to it. So my wife's an interior designer, so we use her. I don't come up with this stuff. She's good at that. But yeah, and just so you know, my company too, like my guy, the people who work for my company they're out there working on a house. We have a house right now on Big Carnelian down to the studs, and we're right on track budget-wise, right on track timing-wise. So this is the largest project that I have done, but to go back, I also started my own brokerage in my 20s. I also became a landlord at 19. So I don't want the size of this project to make anybody who has a decision in this feel trepidatious. I want you to know that that's why I'm not going 3 stories. That's why I had to lop off a part of the building. It's right in my wheelhouse.
I'm going to actually, before Councilmember Thorson, I've got an empty chair here, and that's Candy Peterson, and she's on Zoom. So, Candy, if you got anything to add?
Yeah, I love your enthusiasm, John. And I like the idea of that extra parking. We can really use it, and I appreciate you're going to open that up on Friday nights. So thank you for your interest, and good luck. Thanks.
Cool, thank you.
Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, I did, no specific questions. I have more general vague questions for just why is the city getting involved in this process at all, but not specifically geared toward you, but I really like what you're proposing. I've heard this similar feedback too, and we're talking about redevelopment and what's gone on here too, that a lot of residents feel like we're losing that small town feel with these large projects, and that, this seems to kind of really fit in with existing North St. Paul, and, parking is always a concern. It's an ongoing discussion, and you're accounting for that. So, I just think it's great that what you're proposing here, and that you continue to want to invest in North St. Paul. So thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Councilmember Wong?
Yeah, just a clarification, maybe I missed it. It says 9 residential spaces, but I think you said 12?
12.
12.
Yes. Yeah, it's 12. I was
okay.
going very conservative on that
Okay.
At the time that I had that printed. So 12 residential up top, and then 5 commercial. There'd be 3 in the front, 1, 2, 3 very equal spaces, 30 feet wide by about 50 feet deep. And then there'd be a warehouse in the back, and that's where I'm talking potential volleyball. And then in the basement, there's also room for a warehouse. So total of 5 commercial and 12 residential.
Do you have an idea of if that's going to be like a 1-bedroom, a studio? Like, what does that
All
break down?
2-bedroom, 2 baths.
2-bedroom, 2
Yeah.
baths.
800 square feet each.
Turn it over to the Planning Commission. Elaine?
Just an idea from the first page, the first photo.
Yes.
Or rendering that we have. It doesn't, I don't get a sense of what the street front would look like.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Um,
Do you have any ideas on
mean-
what you're thinking?
Yeah, I got to just be honest, it's nothing fancy. Right now, the Lilly building, the foundation of the Lilly building goes right up to the city sidewalk, and I'm using that foundation, I'm using those walls. So to be honest, it's not, if someone may propose a plan to scrape it and set it back and add trees. That's not in this plan. But one thing I didn't mention is that if I can pull this off and I get the parking I need, I would be very happy to dedicate the west side of my current building, where I can park 3 cars, it's an asphalt jungle over there, it's so ugly, to common gardens of some sort. And I don't know, I got to figure that out. Maybe Robert from the EDA might have some resources, but if I can get better parking, I'd be happy to give up that space as more of a common garden for the city. So that's something I want you guys to think about, and I forgot to mention that, but
Well, maybe I could clarify my question a little bit. And that would be, are you thinking of adding any windows?
oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Those are windows.
These are all,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm
I
sorry.
couldn't tell exactly.
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that was.
yeah.
Thank you.
Those are all windows. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of glass.
Okay. Thanks. Pardon me? Well, you never know.
You never know. Yeah, I got to talk to the architect. He should have drew somebody in there smiling and waving.
Thank you.
That would have helped.
There you go.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
I do like the brick and the archways. That brings back nostalgia downtown. So
Cool.
I think that's really a cool look to the building. That's all.
All right. Thank you.
EDA. Robert?
Yeah, just a couple. First comment on the car show parking. You don't have to offer, they'll just come in.
I'm okay with them coming in though. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm speaking from experience here. What general timing are you thinking?
As soon, I feel like I need to give myself a good 4 to 5 months of planning, and planning / potential abatement, and abatement studies. And I need 5 months for that. Once I begin out there and we get our first guys out there with the crane and the boxes and we're ready to start demoing, 12 months and we can get this project done.
And then you had mentioned, so 12 2-bed, 2-bath. Do you have a, you don't have to share it now. You could share it offline if you want. But you've got an idea on rent ranges and that you'd be in.
Yeah, I mean, and what I'm doing for my rent range, my rents on when I initially was putting my numbers together were low. They felt fine to me at the time based on what I know about North St. Paul. But then I researched what the Sentinel is charging, and I said, cripes, I'm about $400 low on my numbers. So for what it's worth, I'm less than the Sentinel, but I'm higher than where my initial numbers were coming in at. But I kept myself about $100 a unit less than what I saw online for the Sentinel.
And do you have any sort of plan within the footprint for common space for tenants, whether it's community room or fitness room or anything along
Possibly.
those lines?
So with the front 3 spaces, ideally I am looking for 3 individual tenants, but I also have to say a crazy idea that my wife wants to do, and I wish she was here. She's in Texas right now. she would speak to it better. But if you know have you ever been to Keg and Case on West 7th in St. Paul? It's a big warehouse. It's probably 3 times the size of the Lilly building, 3 or 4 times. It's gigantic. And they have vendors in there. They've got restaurants. They got a guy who makes caramel apples. They got a brewery. They've got all of that, and it shares a common space. There's a vision that could actually be kind of fun too. So I'm gonna defer to my wife for her creativity, who's not here. So I'm taking the easy way out. And I've got a really good leasing agent too, who does a lot of work in the East Metro. So he'll help me on that regard. But yeah, Robert, to answer that question, there could very well be common space in the building.
I think the only other thing is, and again, I think we can talk about it offline, but we'd certainly at some point like to hear about, what you perceive kind of completed tax assessed value of the project once it's done.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Do you mind?
Oh yeah.
I just thought of that when you mentioned it. You have 12 units, so is there going to be a dedicated spot for each unit then for parking? So out of the 26, is 12 of those going to be dedicated for your tenants?
Yeah. I'm going to have to give them a space
At least
each.
one space?
Yeah, I'll give one space each. I think that's going to be my best way to do it with them. Yeah. So I'm not, but for sure not 2 spaces
So
each.
you have 26 is what your plan is when you're done with the whole project?
Yes.
And then 12 of them will go towards
Yep.
tenants, and then 14 would be available for whatever else?
Right.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Well, let me ask one other question, then, especially since you talked about potentially, common space, almost for like the pop-up business kind of concept. How many entrances?
Well, right now in the plan that I have, I really just have my front entrances for the 3 commercial spaces.
Well, that's actually what I was asking about.
Yeah, so at this point, there'd be 3 entrances off the front.
Okay.
And then there'd be entrances off the side. Currently, there's an entrance on the east side that, you're almost walking into the post office parking lot to get into the building. And what I do is I'd add overhead garage doors on the west side near the parking area to get into the commercial space or to the industrial spaces.
Any other questions? So we'll turn it over to city manager. I think you got to.
Sure. So I'm going to preface this, and I'll tell the other group this too. I'm going to have some questions. If you're not at a point where you're comfortable answering them, don't.
Okay.
Or if you want to give us some fuzzy answers, that's fine too. I'm not trying to press you to start sharing information you're not ready to share. But to Councilmember Thorson's point about why is the EDA involved? If the EDA were not involved, would you be in a position to just approach the Lilly property owners on your own and just make this happen?
Yeah, I would, but at the same time, you're the planning commission? At the same time, what I don't want to do is take on how I said I don't want to go over budget, right? I don't want to take on a project of this scope and have my ideas challenged at every corner. And I don't know if they would be or not. We haven't worked together before, but I don't know. I don't know. But my thought is if I can start with the EDA, the city, and the planning commission all on the same page, and I can hand this out, and people kind of like the arches, and you want to make sure there's windows, and we're already getting on the same page, to me, that could be worth tens of thousands of dollars in me coming up with a plan that I later have to mess with because it wasn't exactly what the planning commission was hoping to see. So the long and short of it, that's why I am here now, rather than just writing an offer.
Okay. And have you assembled kind of an equity team or banking relationships, or is that something you would do later?
Yeah, I've already begun that process. Yeah.
Have you determined whether you would need any public financial assistance?
I would love if there was a little bit of assistance for a couple items. I mean, there are 2 specific items that come to mind, and I don't know the reality of it, but the 2 are, I know we're going to have some abatement in the building, and it'd be great if there was any city help. Maybe that happens while it's on the city's books. I'm not sure. And then the other thing is there's a electrical pole in the back that is a transformer that's really close to the building, And that needs to be moved, but it'd be great if I could figure out how to pull that off with city help or public help, I guess. So those are really my two things for me.
Okay. I think that's, oh, and I think maybe I know the answer to some of these, but have you done any kind of market study to know, or you're relying on the Sentinel, or?
No, market study is solid, yeah. No, I've got, so for the commercial, my commercial real estate broker is Crossroads Properties. They're local. I'm sure some people in the room know some of the guys who work for them. And they help me analyze the commercial spaces and what the rates are, the going rates in the East Metro are. So I've got it down to a buck a square foot. I mean, either way, it's tight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, so you'd mentioned you had a structural engineer go look through the place with you. Have you done any other kind of preliminary due diligence, or is that it?
Nope, we just walked it together, and he pointed at things, and he said, I know what that is. He goes, be wary of that. That looks fine. We took a bunch of notes, and that was it. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all I've got.
Great. Anybody else? Robert?
Yeah, just one more. So, John, you said, right now you got it tagged as 12, 2-bed, 2-bath. As things unfold, do you have flexibilities in that in terms of if the market shows a higher demand for kind of 1-bed, 1-bath to do more units and less of the 2-bed, 2-bath?
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
Okay, so
right, yeah, I'm not stuck on the 12 800 square feet units.
Okay.
If there was if we all analyzed together and that was important to the city, I've got enough space and room in my budget to change that a little bit. But that's kind of my starting point.
Okay, and then and all of those units, if I understand right, are relegated to the second floor?
Second floor, yeah.
Okay, so residential's on 2, kind of
Commercial
retail, commercial out on the front and some in the back.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah.
John, unless you want to add anything else, I'd want to say thank you very much. I appreciate it, and we're excited to hear all this tonight. So.
Good. I'm excited. Hopefully, hopefully it works.
Yep.
All right.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
guys.
All right.
Cool.
And you can stay around for the next.
Well, I got it.
So the next group is headed up by a gentleman named Jim Lavelle, and I'm going to let Jim introduce his team and take it away from there.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Hi, Mayor, EDA members, Planning Commission members, other council members. My name is Jim Lavelle. I am local. I've lived in the Twin Cities my whole life. I started development work well over 15 years ago. With my team here, I've got Bosley Treen and Jeff Reedy and Megan with Momentum Architects. Really excited to be here. I was introduced to the project, I think it was late December, by the Port Authority, by Tanya and Lee. And they had me into their office, and we had a meeting and did some research about the city of North St. Paul and this great downtown. And we've crafted a proposal that's consistent with the comp plan and all the planning that's been done here. So I'll just run you through real quick. If you want to, Jeff, you want to come up and.
Certainly.
I don't know if it's easier to put that here.
Sure.
I've been involved in 5 projects with Jeff, and they're
Yep.
ground-up, multifamily, market-rate projects. They're throughout the Twin Cities, and these are, I don't know, visions, if you want to run them through the vision
Certainly,
of,
yeah.
We
On
do see it here.
Do you, okay, on the first 3 sheets that you see in front of you, we have just a smattering of different projects that we've done.
sorry.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
does that work?
Yep, that works perfect.
Okay. So the designs of these projects range from modern-looking designs to kind of a historic-looking projects. And since your town is a kind of a historic, smallish town with a typical main street, I would direct you to some of the historic images that we have in here. The Selby Dale project on the second page is a project that is located in St. Paul on Selby and Dale. And Jim and myself and Bozer are developing and building that right now. That was a very strict historic submittal to the city. We went through a lot of back and forth with the city to get that to work appropriately with the buildings that surround it, because we're surrounded by historic buildings. On the last page, I want to show you guys the Hopkins project, which is in the lower left-hand corner, and that is also a request by the city of Hopkins to do a more historic-looking building. The size of that building is 134 units, but we broke that building up into several different design elements to break down the mass of the project. So like you see here, so we don't have one long linear elevation of the building on there. We've done that in a number of other buildings. Downtown Victoria, we did the exact same thing with 81 units. I'm kicking myself for not putting that on here because I didn't know what everybody would like to see from us. And also, I just wanted to point out that we didn't come with a rendering of the project, as you can see on the second to last page. We came with a massing of the project because really the rendering, the design of the building really takes us a lot of time to come up with that. And that's a lot of back and forth between the owner and the city, the architects and the city, and the owner and the city, and back and forth. And that's what you see in the first 3 pages of the presentation that we have for you, is a lot of back and forth and working with all of the different entities on trying to come up with something that is unique and good for the neighborhood and good for the city, and a beautiful building. So
obviously we're here where our vision is to demolish the existing structure and build a new market rate project. The projects that we've been involved in have been very successful, and they've been successful primarily because of the amenities and the amenities in the building, but most importantly, the amenities in the neighborhood. And that's why we're here tonight. We've got great trail systems. You've got a variety of restaurants. You can walk to a football game. You can walk to a baseball game. All the different events that happen here in North St. Paul. So that's why we're here. And we're not stuck to 5 stories or 4 stories or 3 stories. We would prefer to do something more dense. It'll help offset land values and provide economies of scale. But we're here just as open dialogue, and the buildings that we all do, all the units have separate washers and or in-unit washers and dryers, high amenity buildings, high amenity finishes. This building has underground parking that's 1-to-1 per dwelling unit, approximately in this design. So I don't know, just trying to be brief, and I don't know if you need anything else from us, and I could let Bozzer speak too.
So just a little bit about me. I'm Jim's partner. I'm actually a urologist and got into real estate about 10 years ago, and Jim and I have done a number of these projects together. One of the most recent ones we did was the Isaac Building in Roseville. So we developed a 6-acre lot there. Half of it was a medical office building with my wife's practice trained dermatology in Roseville. And then we built a 126 unit. It was the first Class A building in Roseville. And when we started talking about North St. Paul, I said, well, this is exactly sort of where I think the trend is right now. I think there's a lot of people. We have a lot of buildings in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and the trend is people, for many reasons, want to be in a place like Roseville, like North St. Paul, Maplewood. I think there's a lot of sort of push to or discovering sort of these hidden gems, but they can still have access to whatever they need in downtown. And so, when the port first kind of brought this idea to us, we said, well, this is a great spot. It kind of fits exactly what we're trying to accomplish with our other buildings. It would be a pretty sizable investment. You asked the question about equity. I mean, I think this is going to end up be a $25 to $30 million project when it's all said and done. The equity, we do our own equity, so I'm the main equity partner. I would probably do all or majority of the equity. We'll often open it up to sort of friends and family, and if there was local investors that wanted to participate, we always sort of open it up pro rata, and I've always done that on our last several deals, even though I'm the majority owner and put in most of the equity and sign the guarantee. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to really improve the neighborhood. I think when we look at parking, we'd have roughly, in the sort of the 90 unit or 85 unit version, we had about 96 stalls, I think.
It's about 1-to-1, one parking stall per each dwelling unit.
So
and we tried to get that as large as we could on this particular project, underground and covered parking.
And then I think our vision too is to bring in, some sort of an amenity tenant. So whether that is, a restaurant. So we own a restaurant. My family owns a restaurant in Uptown, Amore Uptown. So I feel like I know the restaurant space pretty well. Our thought would be to try to bring in something like that. Maybe even if it's not as a big restaurant concept, as sort of a coffee shop, bakery. So something that benefits not only the tenants in the building, but the city as well.
Oh, yeah, we're also in this concept, so on first floor of this building, we're showing a concept that's been around for a long time, but has become more popular. We're showing about 3,000 space of commercial space, busted into two different, could be combined, or it's about 2,200, excuse me. And then there's 4 live-work units in the middle of the building, and then the first floor is the front of the house, we call it, for the apartment building. So it had the amenity space, there'd be a leasing office, there'd be all different kinds of things that we put down there, coffee bar. Our buildings are always equipped with a nice fitness center. We're currently building maker spaces in our building that's under construction now. So, again, this is just the first. It was put together in days by Jeff and his team to meet our deadline. So it's just a really first quick blush at this site. So hopefully it gives you something to give us feedback on.
What is live work? Is that live and work? I mean, it sounds like you live there and you work there. So it's different than an apartment? It's more of
It's different than an apartment, yeah. It's got a space that can be opened up that the public can come in and say it's an accountant. It could be as simple as an accountant or a State Farm agent or a small art studio. There's many different uses that could utilize that kind of space.
But they could also live there and
They can also live there, yeah.
Got it.
And then we could also create dwelling units. We could have walk-up dwelling units there. We did that on a project called The Grove, and there was 3 in that building,
Yeah.
and they were actually the first ones that were leased.
The Grove is on your first page of that packet.
I was going to ask, Jim, either you or somebody from your team maybe speak a little bit more of those, to the live-work units where you've seen it successful and kind of what they can bring to a community and the types of folks they would attract.
I think the audience is rather large for what kind of people they can attract. There's some similar type units in northeast Minneapolis that have been developed. And the end users it's a wide variety of different types of uses. Again, maybe it's an accountant that's just had, a small accountant. And the way that the dwelling units are set up is they're bifurcated so that they have a nice, typically lots of glass, inviting area for those people to come in and have their desk or a couple of people working, and then the back of house is back of house. It's big enough, those units are big enough to do 1 or 2 bedrooms in the back and have their kitchen and everything else. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I see the number of uses can be.
No, it's helpful. I've just, one of the reasons I've asked is because I know in a number of, concept plans and things we've had within the city, we have identified, live-work units, but they've never come to bear. And so I'm always curious as to, where are they coming to bear, and do they tend to, do they tend to track, let's say the first one is I look at them and I think starving artist, right? Somebody is, right? So do they tend to attract kind of similar uses, or that they divergent? I mean, do you have insurance next to some guy that's welding art next door, or what does that look like?
I haven't personally developed a building with live-work units, so I can't speak to a personal experience with.
Yep.
With leasing and but if you want,
I think it comes down to more of exactly what you were talking about, but it also provides the flexibility for maybe this is a small commercial space too that could be opened up for maybe they don't live in the second one. Maybe that is all rented out as like a small insurance office, but then the third one is a ceramic or a potter, and then the fourth one is a bike sales or a repair shop or something like that. I think it's a very convertible idea. So if that helps out.
I think the thought there was some flexibility. So if during lease up suddenly we can attract 4 people that specifically want that, whether it's an artist or accountant or whatever, And if it turns out that, we're not getting that, then great, we have the ability to convert it into a unit.
Correct.
So it's just a flexible option. And our artists would hopefully be well-fed artists to sort of take that, not most of it.
I also
The other
wanted
thing
to-
too is important, we try and activate our streetscape as much as we can in all these buildings that are in these urban settings. So when that's, and then make it on a real personal level too. So, we're not gonna have a small Walmart in those,
Right.
Exactly. One of the other items I wanted to bring up to everybody's attention was, in the last hour, Jim had challenged our design team to come up with an option of pushing the top floor back. And what that does, and that's on your last page of your packet, and what that does is that really provides a drop down in the scale of the building to the street. And it also provides a very nice rooftop amenity for the building. And it just shows you the flexibility of this building and the flexibility of the design that we're at right now. Because these are just ideas that are out there. But I think that this design idea on the last page really has an interesting idea to it, where we pull that top floor of the building back a little bit to knock down the scale of the building to the main street. And it provides the huge amenity upstairs.
Great. So when you said hidden gem, I agree with you. I think North St. Paul is a hidden gem. We've been investing a lot of money the past couple of years in our community, and I think we are kind of a hidden gem in the metro area. And so I appreciate that comment, that we are a hidden gem. So why don't I turn it over to the council if you got any questions. Councilmember Cole?
Again, I want to thank you for being here. This is exciting. I looked up the Isaac Building as well. It's a beautiful property. Beauty of having a computer while you guys are talking away. But beautiful looking building. Thank you for your enthusiasm in North St. Paul. I mirror that of I think everybody sitting up here. We're a little gem that kind of sits over here. We've got our own downtown. We've got a lot of history. So we're excited to start to move forward.
Councilmember Juan?
Yeah, again, thank you all for being here and providing, such wonderful samples. I do have a question in regards to a timeline. So what would that look like for something of this size?
The physical construction of the building will probably take 14 months.
Correct.
The planning to get to a permit ready is probably going to take us 4 to 5 months as far as pushing Jeff along.
Sure. This is how it always goes. I heard your number, by the way. I was close enough.
Financing and all that stuff would take place while we're doing financing for the entire project would happen concurrently with getting to permits and everything else. A land close could happen relatively quickly. Understanding environmental issues and all the other, the property issues. As Bozzer said, this building in this mass and this size is probably in the range of $25 to $27 million. The rents that have been forecasted for this building are based off the Sentinel building next door. The rent on a per square foot basis at the Sentinel on the smaller dwelling units is about $2.25 a foot, and the bigger units is about $1.70 a foot. So if you do that math based on a really sharp increase in construction materials, there's probably going to be a need or an ask to use some of those financial tools to help us. What that number is, I don't know. I won't know for several months. We'll need to really grind in and find out what we're going to build to answer those questions. So, do you guys want to add to that at all?
No.
And so,
So bottom line, in 18 to 20 months, we could have a building once we sort of know we're moving forward. And, but not to sort of sugarcoat, I think, in Roseville, for example, we did need some TIF, and part of that was, we needed to have, Twin Cities, sort of type rents to sort of pay for the construction costs that we know are what they are. We can't change that. I mean, they've gone up, even I don't think it'd be anything ridiculous, but there, we would probably need just, to close the gap a little bit, we probably would need some sort, and I think that's sort of true if you look at most, suburbs, most suburban deals that we've done in the last 2 years, whether it's Roseville, we typically have needed some sort of TIF that, in the grand scheme of things, still you're looking at the trade-off of still a, $25 million building when it's all said and done, so even if there is a little bit of TIF help with that, it's still a big win in the end.
The Port Authority's also referenced some other tools too, and I'm not sure how far down the path they've gone investigating if there are inks or dyes or other things that were associated with the previous use of this building, if there's grants that can help offset some of those costs, demolition costs, and all those other things too. So we may need to reach into that toolbox and use those tools, or it seems quite evident that we will. To what extent, we just don't know.
Councilmember Wong, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, and maybe you don't know yet, but just wondering if there are any ideas towards sustainability and maybe green building or something like that.
Well, we both can. We have partners on our Selby and Dale project that we're going to be doing solar on our rooftop. The buildings are super high efficiency from everything is buying, the Energy Star appliances to envelope systems of the buildings. Robert's really familiar with this. What else? We'll do the energy assistance program with XL. So we have the White group come in and they do a complete analysis of our systems, and they do different layers for enrolling in that program. So it's light fixtures, it's switches, it's fans, it's all those different systems. So
EV charging stations in the basement.
Yep.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, guys. I really like the concept. I'm a proponent of keeping our building momentum going for redevelopment. So this sounds like this would suit our plans, and it's very exciting. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Thorson.
Yeah, I mean, this is very similar to that Sentinel project, and, I guess the fact that it's such a larger scale compared to what we just, the earlier proposal, and that's not to say there might not be other interested parties too in different proposals, but I think this is a great, idea and concept, and it fits right in with what kind of has been going on with redevelopment. I guess I'm, still just kind of struggling on why the city is getting involved and why you can't just deal directly with the property owner. But, I'm mindful of usually these larger projects, they're always asking for things like TIF and things like that, and it's not something that we've supported that in the past in the council. So, I think what I've been seeing here is it's great and exciting, and they're two very different types of projects, and I know we're not supposed to be picking, and I'm certainly not advocating for one or the other, but this is, like I said, it's right in line with what we've seen downtown, and it's exciting to see all this interest in North St. Paul. So thank you.
Well, Planning Commission.
I suppose I should turn the mic on this time, huh? Well,
You bring it down too, to your height. There you go.
well, no, I'll turn away. No. I think like the earlier project, I think either one of them kind of fits what we're trying to attempt downtown. It's a matter of scale more than anything else. And, I certainly appreciate the comments about trying to maintain the historical aspects of the downtown. So, there's no specific design here, but I don't think one couldn't be created that would fit. Let's put it that way.
I guess my part too is that I'm glad that parking is thought of for every unit, because North St. Paul's tight. We don't have spots around for people to be able to park and walk. So that's something I'm mindful of. Appreciate that. Also, do you guys hold on to the building? Is this your investment, or do you turn around and resell it, or how does this look into the future for North St. Paul, who we're working with?
Yeah, great question. So my thought is always all the buildings that we have built, especially where Jim and I were the principals, it's a long-term hold. That's kind of, I'm I'm still young enough. I'm only 45. I got 5 kids at home to put through college one day. So hopefully these investments will just be sort of long-term things for us. So that's the plan. And I'm a local guy, so I don't plan on selling. Of course, if some billionaire walks in and everyone's got a price, but in general, no. Our intent is always to build these and hold these and keep these as long-term assets. So.
All right, thank you.
EDA, Robert?
Yeah, just one comment. I would, and obviously you're not to that stage yet, but you've got underground parking here. Doing anything underground in this town is a real challenge. Water, yep. It's we're built on a swamp, basically, but I know that from personal experience.
Not the whole town.
Not the whole town.
Not the whole town.
But it can be a challenge, so just something to pay attention to. Can you, Jim, you can address this, but maybe more for Jeff. I'll just say from, when we look at the concepts, and I know these are just concepts, but it is, although we just had the Sentinel go in, we do have on this parcel, it is adjacent to the post office, which is in the historic building. Can you speak a little bit about how you would get there to an acceptable kind of facade and product that fits in with the community? And that's not to say that any of the renderings you presented are offensive by any means, but I think there is some work to be done to.
I think we need to know from City Council what their direction would want to be, and we would work, the owners and City Council would work together to come to some solution. Whether it's a modern-looking building to look forward to the future or a historic building to nod to the past. What is most important to me as an architect is to have an active street front, and that's why you see on our plan what we have up front. We have the common spaces for the apartment rental. We have the live-work units that are active on the street, and then we have the 2 commercials on the end that are active on the street. And what we don't want to have happen is have a large wall of nothingness on the street. And I just want to say that I found you guys from your car show, and I'm a frequenter of your car show. I come here all the time in the summertime. So it is. I've seen how people interact on your street and how important it is to keep an active storefront on the street. So I've seen that. I've heard it. I get it. The historic aspects versus the modern aspects, that'll be fleshed out in the design, and it's more of a working with everybody and see what everybody wants. So I don't have we can make any building look beautiful, and we do. And so whether it's a modern one or a historic one, it doesn't matter to me. So, okay? Does that make?
Maybe this is another way to get there too, and my reaction to your question is more of how do we get through a design process, and maybe that's more of like a design charrette process.
Yeah.
Where there's a bunch of images and we start picking images and how do you implement it? And we'd be happy to do that with staff. And if there's a neighborhood association, I didn't investigate that, or whoever the stakeholders are, we could get through that process in a really collaborative way.
Right.
So,
yeah, to cut to the chase a little bit, I'm intimately familiar with this and the fact that you can do it and will do it. I'm really more for the group that it's not, hey, here's our 6 facades, pick one. Right.
Right.
There'll be a
Right.
process.
It's a process.
Right.
Right.
And
Over
just wanted the group to understand that.
Several weeks, several months, right? Yeah.
We make Jeff do a lot of redos and don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, never happens.
I wanted to say that the Hopkins design that you see on, I think it's the 3rd page, that's actually the 2nd design of that building. We started out with an Art Deco design on that building, and that was rejected by the city, by planning in the city. So we came back with a 2nd design, and frankly, I think it's better than the first one. So.
And I think I heard this either here today in this gathering or maybe outside of this gathering, but when we look at the kind of total scale, number of units, et cetera, this I understand this is not kind of it's got to be X number of units to make this thing work. Is there a whether it's a unit number or a square footage number where there's a diminishing return where it kind of falls outside of your ideal development?
I don't think there's like a threshold where it's 70 units, or if you hit 69, we walk away. Right. What I was trying to do is provide as much revenue in my mind to make it as financially feasible with a larger building so that any financial assistance would be minimized. And I'm not saying that just if we take this building and make it 3 stories or 4 stories or however big this building ends up being, that's where we generated, or how we generate. And then when you build, let's just say if you build a 200-unit building versus a 50-unit apartment building, you probably know this is better than anybody. The economies of scale, there's 200 dwelling units, so the painter's going to do 200 instead of 50, so maybe he's going to paint them a little bit cheaper, each one of them. So we try and maximize out the real estate with those kind of big, large concepts you're drilling around in your mind.
Yep.
But it's not 40. It
Right.
doesn't work at 40 or probably 50. I think it's got to be somewhere, at least 65 units or more for it to make sense.
Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah, is there kind of a point where this may not work financially? What is, can I ask?
Not to interrupt, but it's like managing a 30-unit apartment building versus a 90-unit apartment building.
Same effort.
It's the same effort, right? So one property manager can manage this, and you're going to have enough. So it's maximizing all those numbers.
Right. How many? Can I ask how many the Selby Dale? How many units are in there?
It's a 5-story building with 91 units, and it's
Oh, it's that big.
6 parking stalls.
Okay.
It's coming out of the ground now. We had a little bit of delay with XL, but that building will be finished in first quarter of 23.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
City Manager?
Thank you. So I'll ask some of the same kinds of questions. Have you done any kind of market study?
I researched rents at Sentinel and many other recent builds around here, and I just left it in that trade. I did not call the Maxfields or anybody else. I do track rents around the Twin Cities, and those quoted rents were just right across the street.
Okay. And just for both developers, our EDA, Economic Development Authority, has hired Maxfield to do kind of a generalized market study, and that might be of use to you when it comes in. Have you done any kind of due diligence? And
No, out of respect, we were really excited when the port called us and we were introduced to this project. But out of respect to the city, who was engaging with Tony and the property owners, we haven't. We've been real quiet. No door knocking, no calling. We haven't been in the building yet.
And so if the EDA were to back away and be more open to people working directly, is that something you would be prepared to do?
Buzz and I spoke about yes, and we'd be more than capable and willing to go negotiate our own deal. I actually know the broker. He's a friend of my wife's. Anyway, he's been at our house for a Halloween party. Tony has.
So I don't know with the Planning Commission what the requirements are, but on a building of this size, just kind of so you know, I would probably recommend a shadow study.
We're very familiar with completing all those types of things, yeah.
I think that's all I had.
Want to maybe just mention a little bit about the equity sharing? You kind of mentioned that. What does that look like? And maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I guess how we typically do our deals, and like Selby Dale is the most recent one, for example. It was a $23 million project. The equity was about $6 million. I put in $4 million of my money, and for $2 million, I sort of opened it up to kind of friends and family. And if there were, and we've typically said, $50,000 to $100,000 minimum. And if there was key leaders, we'd love to have local buy-in. And so, if anyone's a, accredited sort of, technically should probably be an accredited investor, but if somebody said, hey, I want to invest 50 or 100, happy to do that. And, we've typically been very, kind of open and just pro rata with our deals. My money is your money, and I always said that always puts more. In some ways, that it's easier to do it yourself, but the friends and family I always say it kind of puts extra pressure to make sure it's a home run. Because if my mom's putting in $50,000, my sister's putting in $50,000, it better work, because I don't want to hear about it. And the same thing. And if we had certain people in the city who are like, hey, I really want to invest in this project, what we typically do is I do a Zoom call. By then we'd have all the numbers kind of ironed out and be like, well, here's the exact pro forma. By then we would have already had financing, everything sort of lined up, and I'd say, all right, here's the equity, here's what's available, and just kind of open it up to anybody who was sort of willing to do that. I'd be happy to do that. Especially, I would love to sort of bring in, if there was local people that wanted to do that, it would be great, because then you sort of have, I always say it's nice to have sort of local buy-in and someone to keep an eye on the building, if you're not there every day. And so yeah, I'd be very open to doing that too, if in the city. And I think the numbers would be very similar to our Selby Dale project in terms of the equity and the total amount and all of that. I think would be relatively similar ballpark. So
Okay, good, thank you. Anybody else, any last words? If not, thank you, both of, I'm sorry, Elaine.
I was just going to mention, since both development groups are still here, that, at least from my perspective, from when we talk about the historic character of North St. Paul, I appreciate that both seem to understand that that's not just what the building looks like, physically, but it's the streetscape elements and the life on the street and being inviting for people to enter, so to speak, the kind of storefront approach. So I just wanted to clarify what that means when we use that term. But I think that was understood, but just for the audience more than anyone else. Thank you.
So maybe I just touch really quickly on next steps. I think, first of all, the development teams, if they want to continue to pursue this, time is money. They're going to, and so they have to make a decision based on what they've heard from the questions they've heard from you, if they think there's sufficient interest for them to go forward. The EDA, regardless of whether the EDA is part of the purchasing process or not, I feel pretty confident the EDA will have some role in either project. I think with Mr. Peach's project, he'd mentioned environmental assistance and abatement assistance, and that's a role that the EDA would typically work with Ramsey County or other granting agencies, and he may need other financial assistance. It's hard to say at this point. And with the second group, with tax increment financing, the EDA would have a role, and obviously the city council would. So I think really the first place would be for the EDA to start to maybe zone in on one or the other. And one of the things I wanted to hear here today is whether there was one of them that seemed infeasible, like either politically or because of the plan or planning issues. I'm not hearing that there's one that's like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And I know I told you couldn't choose one, but usually people's antennas can clue into that kind of stuff. So I do think it really kind of moves on back to the EDA now. But certainly, if any policymakers have further questions, want to seek any of my thoughts further, feel free to do so. And I think that's all I have.
So moving forward then, we're going to, from here, the next step then is what?
I think to the extent either or both developers are interested, for them, the EDA to have further conversations, and the EDA has chosen the Port Consulting to kind of be the broker. So I think Port Consulting probably has a role as well, and maybe doing some, to the degree possible with the numbers we have, some kind of rudimentary cost benefit analysis. I think on the face of it, Mr. Peach's development, like from a tax base standpoint, would have a lesser tax base benefit. From a cost standpoint, it would likely need a lesser amount of public assistance. And the converse is true with the group, but I think maybe the port consulting could help. I don't think that they'll get to very finite numbers, but giving a little bit more gut feel to that, if one has kind of a greater overall benefit in that cost benefit analysis. We'll talk a little bit more with the second group about what scaling back might look like. I think I heard that a couple of times from folks as a question. So Mr. Lavelle and his team hit on this. All this stuff is really kind of a, what's the word, like iterative process where there's a lot of back and forth. And, port consulting, the Port Authority can play a role in that, and I can play a role in that, and maybe try to help refine the proposals. And if both of them want to continue, ultimately, somebody's going to have to pick one. And I think that somebody would likely be the EDA because of their role as being the assistance arm.
Good. With that, thank you, all of you. Like I said, I think we are a hidden gem here in North St. Paul, and we would welcome either of you. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
We don't have any other business, so any other comments or anything? If not, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Wong,
Second.
second by Councilmember Cole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.